Ready to flip the script on understanding the neurodivergent brain? Welcome to Mrs. C and Me. Start here, understanding ADHD from the inside out. We're diving deep into the science and the soul of the ADHD experience. It's time to drop our masks and step off of the sidelines and into the light, because you and your child were always meant to shine. Welcome to Lesson 1, the Three Faces of ADHD: Difference, Disorder, and Disability. So welcome. First of all, if you have not watched my introduction, please jump over there just to meet me, learn a little bit about me. It's very important as I am free talking, I guess you can say, through these lessons. So it's a lot like what happens in my school counseling office when a parent comes in. So take a minute to run over there and just kind of see who I am, what I'm about, and what my approach is. All right. So let's start with the three faces of ADHD: difference, disorder, and disability. So I start with this because often ADHD is misunderstood, as are a lot of disabilities. ADHD, because it's not one that we can see all the symptoms or the impacts of life. And unfortunately, because ADHD symptoms are often understood, observed, and even people believe are character flaws and choices and personality traits. And so some people have a really hard time wrapping their head around the fact that this is a nervous system and brain-based difference. So I like to start with just explaining to everyone that ADHD is a difference. It can be like a pesky mosquito. It comes around, it bothers you, it can cause you some annoyance, sometimes frustration, due to environmental things like, your mood, how you're feeling, if you've been eating, all the regular human things. But if you have ADHD, those things can actually impact your symptoms. The difference is often the ones that kind of walk around, the people that walk around kind of saying, maybe I have ADHD, or there's the ADHD, but it's more sort of a joke, more sort of an observation, and something that just kind of comes and goes and, is persistent enough, like a mosquito, that you recognize it, but maybe not, impacting your life so much that you fall into the disorder and the disability. If you are a female, or if your child is a female, though, this can change over a lifetime. So it's very important to understand that and to stay connected to the level of ADHD symptoms and how they're impacting your world. So a disorder. So this is kind of where I call the middle ground, where we're seeing some struggles. We're seeing some problems, and this is when we start to see it, impacting the child's life. I'm going to speak mostly from children in this series, but, it's there, and it's definitely impacting them. It's impacting their moods. It's impacting their relationships. There's a lot of misunderstanding or masking going around for you to, feel successful or to function. And that would definitely be getting it into the disorder part. This is usually when we start to look for the diagnosis, because everything else has sort of been checked, our physical, our blood works, all that stuff, our levels, our hormone levels, all been checked, and there's something still at play. So this is where I would say ADHD falls into the disorder. Now, when it comes to the level of disability, this means it impacts, I like to say, most of the areas of your life. I live with ADHD at a severity that actually shocks some assessors, but has been a life gift to realize that it's how my brain's built, it's how my body's built, and how my nervous system's built. It's given me a lot of compassion and grace for myself and for the people around me. However, with that, I also had to accept that I have a disability that's based in emotion. We focus a lot on the focus and attention, which are all very valid parts of this disorder disability, especially with learning. But it really comes down to the part that people talk about, the part that impacts like the soul and the heart of a person, is the emotional part, the feelings. And we will get into that more into a further lesson. So let's jump back to what is ADHD. So we have so much information out there. There's information on social media, and I am not putting it down. There are some amazing people out there, and I'm hoping to share some of my favorites with you. But you also have to be careful, just like anything else. Are they selling something? Do they have supplements? All that stuff. Just to, just to be able to discern their information. Are they selling? Or are they selling and providing information? Because a lot of times they're doing both. But it's important to understand that because ADHD is recognized now, and because they see how wrong they were with, thinking it was only little boys and all that kind of stuff. It's a hot topic right now, and it's a hot place of research. It's very exciting, actually, in the research, because we have so many people discovering so many things. And so for the neurodivergent community, it's actually a beautiful time. So let's just go, what is ADHD? Most people think right away, focused attention, hyperactivity, and all of those things are accurate. But I want to go just a little bit further, because Dr. Barkley kind of says it the best when he says, it's kind of the ability of knowing what to do, but not knowing how to do it, or knowing how to do it, but not being able to get started. I think his actual quote is, it's a disorder of doing what you know and not knowing what to do. So I'm going to give you a little scenario that you might be able to connect with. ADHD is often compared to a race car without brakes, or a race car, or a car. There's a book that I use in my counseling, which is My Brain is a Race Car. It's a great tool for explaining ADHD to small children. But let's go with this. So think of yourself sort of in a high performance car. So a sports car or your favorite car. And for this, you do have to understand what a clutch is. A lot of us now just drive the automatic vehicles. So that part you might not understand. Use this idea that the knowing part is your back brain and the doing part is your front brain. I do jump into the biology of this in further lessons. But for today, knowing, back brain, doing, front brain. So imagine you're sitting at a green light in a high-performance sports car. You're a professional driver, so you know what to do. You're ready to go. You know exactly how the car or the internal combustion engine works. You know the rules of the road. You know the tricks, and you know that you're currently stopped or idling, and you're blocking any traffic from behind you. So this is the back brain, the knowledge. You're aware. You're aware where you are, and you're aware what you're doing. The light turns green, and you don't move. So the people behind you are honking. Think of this as your boss or the teacher is waiting for you. So they're waiting for your answer, or they're waiting for the, assignment or whatever the project that you're about to hand in. So we're at an importance of 10-10. We know we need to move the car. We know we're supposed to be doing something. So we press the gas pedal. The thing we know should give us what we need. So we push it. The engine revs, you can hear the power, you can see that little RPM needle climb into the red, you can see everything's working, except the car doesn't move an inch. Why? Because the clutch is stuck. I guess you could also say it's in park, if you're using on auto, I guess. So let's look at this from the world's perspective, or the neurotypical, typical brain people perspective. To the people that are honking behind you, you look rude. It looks like you're just sitting there, oblivious to everyone around you. They automatically think you're doing something negative, like on your phone, or that you're just lazy, or that you're trying to be difficult, or that you're trying to cause problems. We as humans tend to jump right to these things when we're frustrated. Now look at it from an ADHD perspective. So put the ADHD lens on it. You're actually working harder than anyone else on the road. You're floorboarding that gas pedal. Your heart is racing because you don't know why you can't go. Why isn't it moving? Everything's there. You know what to do. Why can't you do it? And you're exhausted. After a while, you can't even take the overwhelm of these thoughts, and you just get exhausted trying to make the car engage. The lesson in this is that ADHD isn't a problem with the engine. So think of the engine as your child, or your power, your intelligence. It's super. Most of us neurodivergents have super high intelligence. It's just that we're very unique, and it can be hard to assess our intelligence. But think of the engine. So everything's working. Everything's there. Everything you need to succeed is there. Now you're the driver. That's like your character, your intent. In this scenario, the driver wants to move forward. The driver has absolutely no motivation or reason to be causing problems for other people. They definitely don't want to be in the way. They definitely don't want to be causing harm. But for whatever reason, they can't move. And why? Because it's the transmission. It's the connection between those two, between the intelligence and between the driver, the character, the intent of the driver. The problem is the transmission isn't working. But so keep that in mind as we go through all of this. And like I said, the sports car is a great way to have a visual when you need one. So now let's just jump into what it really means, knowledge versus performance. One of the single most important concepts about ADHD is that it's not about a lack of information, a lack of not knowing, an example or a reflection of lower intelligence. It's none of those things. If your child has ADHD, they are probably super smart. super, super smart and creative and fun and unique. All right. But again, we go back to Dr. Russell Barkley. It's a knowing doing gap. So knowing what to do, but actually doing it, there's a disconnect. There's a gap in between. The front versus the back brain. So the back brain, again, is knowledge, and it's there. It knows the rules. It knows the social expectations. It knows what it needs to do, but there's a broken connection, or the connection is not linear. It's all over the place, like a kaleidoscope, or I like to tell the kids, our wires are all over the place. Inside view, if you were looking inside under the hood, you'd see that there's no problem with knowledge. In fact, there's a high capacity for knowledge in most cases. But there might be a broken steering wheel, or there might be no brakes. So now we're getting into the working memory and the executive function. And if you don't know what those are, stay tuned. They're coming up in lessons. So let's go back to that difference, disorder, and disability. So ADHD is a difference. It's a variation. Think of that mosquito. It causes some problems. It's a disorder. So this is when it starts to have troubles. If you want to use the race car thing, maybe it takes you just a few minutes to make the connection. And then, like I said, this can change. And in the disability parts, it's usually very obvious, whether it's with your child or whether it's with yourself. You can see how it's impacting relationships and overall life. It impacts your life on many levels. So let's go into the interest-based nervous system. So let's think of it. Typical brains. I never like to use the word normal, just so you know. That's not something I like to use with kids. I like to say typical. I like to say traditional. Things like that. So typical brains are motivated by importance, rewards, and consequences. So the ADHD brain is completely different. All right. So a typical brain can say, I need to clean the house. They will get dopamine from it. They will get a reward of the dopamine from it. They will get a feeling of a job well done. And if they don't do it, they have to face, the mess of their house. All right. So Dr. William Dodson says that the ADHD brain only turns on for 4 things. So think about this when you're dealing with your kid. Is it interesting? Is it fascinating? Is it a challenge or a competition? Is it novelty? Anytime we can make something new and exciting, you watch them engage. Watch those brains and nervous systems just rev right in. Urgency. If it's due in the next 10 minutes, the urgency also provides dopamine. I get into dopamine later as well. Anything you're not understanding here on a deeper level, know or trust that it's coming in the lessons that are coming up. And then there's an off switch. So we have an off switch. And if the task is important, it can be extremely important. And so many parents and teachers have trouble with this. It's so important, and yet they won't do it, or they don't want to do it is often what comes. But it's not interesting. All right. This happens at school. We have to learn things that we're not really interested in, but we still have to learn them. But for ADHD, that's a whole different level, because the brain physically struggles, first of all, to produce dopamine that everybody needs to start learning, to stay focused, all of that stuff. They don't have it. And this isn't laziness. It's literally the lack of fuel. Think of the car again. It's literally a lack of chemical that your body and brain are supposed to produce for you to function at optimal levels. ADHD doesn't do that. Your brain and nervous system are lacking that. So jump back to the car, idling for a minute. Now imagine that you're sitting there and you're can't get the car to move no matter what you do, even though you know what to do. And then suddenly someone leans into your window and says, hey, forget that green light. I bet you can't hit 40 mph in under 4 seconds. Boom, challenge. Or they say something like, I bet you can't beat me in a race. Anything like that. Boom. You've activated their brain, their novelty, and probably produced a little dopamine. All right. The moment that your brain stops worrying about the importance or the green light and starts to switch over to the interest, all of a sudden you're going to see some movement. That clutch, it's gonna kind of bite. It's gonna connect. Or if you use the park thing, you can all of a sudden move it. It's not stuck anymore. And the car will jerk forward. Maybe not necessarily like speed forward, but it will make a bit of a movement. And you aren't moving because you finally realized the green light was green. You always knew it was green. You're moving because you found something that made your brain engage so that you were able to move forward. People with ADHD will talk about feeling like everything is so hard. And that's why so many late diagnosers often have hit some kind of rock bottom. They just cannot continue to do it. When you have to, the simplest of tasks take this much effort to do, and then the hard tasks that are difficult for everyone are like super duper hard for you. And then try to connect with the idea that most of the time we know what to do, but we can't do it, not without some kind of strategy, tool, or intervention. The best part, though, about this is you can learn. But a lot of ADHDers suffer from chronic fatigue and overwhelm. They just can't do it and they burn out. And that's because we are usually giving 100% just to get through our day every single day. Now we're going to get into a little bit of why knowing you have ADHD, getting a diagnosis for ADHD is so important. People right away think it's because of the medication. In some adults, I do know people that have gone through the diagnosis process simply to get the medication, to try the medication. What I find so interesting about that is usually these adults have lived most of their lives not knowing they have ADHD. They've learned a little bit about it. They've identified with it, and they're curious if taking medication can make them feel better, life be easier, and so they go through it, all right? But when it comes to the children, medication is not the first place we start, and it's a part of a treatment plan. So we will get into the medication talk later, but just know that getting a diagnosis for your child of ADHD, I believe, is the responsible thing to do. Whether or not you're going to put medication in their treatment plan is something we'll cover later. But getting that diagnosis and understanding your child is one of the best gifts you will ever give them, all right? Because without it, your child is hearing 20,000 times more than their neurotypical corrections. That's not right. Stop doing that. Stop moving. Hey, focus. Try harder. Too sensitive. Oh, you're being dramatic. Oh my goodness, what are you getting so upset about? Just try harder. You know you can do it. See, you can do it. They get comments like this from us, from teachers, from their peers, and they say it to themselves. And then we're getting into a whole other thing here. Most people start to internalize this. If you don't understand why people might be addressing you that way, you start to believe you are the problem. You start to believe that you are lazy and stupid and uncaring and unmotivated. And it's a horrible way to live. And then we get into secondary trauma, if you will, or I have something I believe that's simply ADH trauma. Living with ADHD, you will experience some discrimination, prejudice, all that stuff. And living undiagnosed, you often get chronic anxiety, you have low self-esteem, you're depressed, your moods are hard, relationships are struggle, things are tough. The power of a label. So I actually wrote an article. I'm on Substack, and I wrote an article last year about labeling and why I think we need to shift the narrative about why labels are not such a bad thing and that we can't escape them. So it's kind of like that choose your hard. Do you want your child to be labeled as a person with ADHD, or do you want them to be labeled as lazy, difficult, emotional, sensitive, dramatic, all that stuff? Because the labels come one way or the other. You just got to decide which ones you want your child to live in. The ADHD tax. So at some point, I don't know that I'll cover it deeply in this course, but maybe I'll do just a little one just on the ADHD tax and what we struggle with often with money, not being able to manage it, dopamine hits for overspending, simply not being able to create lists, and so buying more things than we need, misplacing them within our home and having no idea where to look for them, so we purchase them again. The ADHD tax is crazy. I can personally say from finding out that I had ADHD and then making the correlation between that and some of my spending and financial habits has been life-changing. So it's amazing. I do want to cover just quick in this lesson, as it is our first lesson, a couple things you may hear me refer to as the lost generation. So if you don't know, there's a group of women. I don't have the actual years in front of me, but it's the 70s mostly, okay? And probably anyone, obviously, before that, because 70s is really when they started to diagnose ADHD, and it was in boys, and it was usually for hyperactivity. So a little boy that couldn't sit in his desk or had big outbursts or, class clowns, those kind of things were often ADHD children. So that was happening in the 70s for boys. They did not believe it could happen in girls, which just blows my mind, first of all. And I also don't think that teachers at that time were really educated in it, because later in life, when I was in teacher education, we were barely taught anything about it. So that's part of the problem. I had some fantastic teachers over the years, and I know some of them knew something was up with me, but they didn't quite know either. And as I went on in school, I actually did become kind of a discipline problem, because school was long and I couldn't connect with teachers because I couldn't learn. And because of my low self-esteem and all that stuff, I was terrified to let anyone see that. So I went into mischievous behavior and kind of did that for the rest of my school until I got, a little bit better in college, which we'll find out later, because I found some very unhealthy dopamine producing behaviors, which were not good for my health, but they were great for my academic. So that's something to think about as well. So why is there so much talk and why are so many people being diagnosed? That's the first thing you got to realize. Think about that. 70s into the 80s, girls were diagnosed. This is across the world. Now we know boy, girls, there's not more in boys or less than girls. We don't have any real research or statistics on this because boys have been, followed or tracked since the 70s, and most women, it's just been in the last 10 years. So it's going to be a while before those numbers can come up. But the predictions are it's even, and that gender really has nothing to do with it. The problem with the reason they didn't think girls could have it, which I also totally disagree with, because I see girls with hyper bodies like me. I see girls with just as many of the symptoms as boys. So I'm not sure, who originally thought of that. But yes, we can have hyper brains, which is what they do think more girls struggle with. I actually think girls just figure out masking faster. They figure out to calm their bodies. I know I did. So you get the traditional view. Everyone thinks that if you have ADHD, you explode, you run, you interrupt, you disrupt, you're a problem. And so you get referred for help faster. Schools want you, they have your attention. They want your parents to do what they need to do because it's not working in the classroom. And it's probably not working in your child's social life either, which can be heartbreaking to watch. Then we have what they do put on girls more, and that is that it's inward, it implodes. It can look like daydreaming. It can look like chattiness. I got that one. It can be perfectionism up to a point, or complete laziness. This is another one I hear from my parenting groups. They're like, it's one or the other. They have no middle ground. And often they're a problem for the teacher. They aren't, a problem for their teacher. They are often quiet. And so, teachers can be concerned, but they don't really have to interact with the child over much because they're well behaved and they do what's expected of them. They just don't seem to be excelling at school. The other thing is some ADHDers, and girls especially, do excel at school, are able to keep it together for quite a while. I, again, attribute this to high intelligence. They're able to learn it quickly, and then they're able to use the rest of their energy to mask and everything else. And then as academics get more difficult and they don't learn it as quickly, and they start to struggle. They start to struggle with keeping that mask on and keeping up. And often by this time too, they've identified that they're not like their peers, but they haven't shared it. And so they've started to internalize, I'm not good enough. Why is this so hard for me? I'm broken. Why does everything hurt? We get into all that. I mentioned masking. I will discuss masking. Masking is a huge topic. Masking is when we change our behavior simply to fit in, to be accepted, and often to be loved. So many of the women that were in the lost generation that are finding out now, they became overachievers. I did. When I finally figured out how to learn, then I just wanted to keep learning, which is why I probably have 2 master's degrees. Also impulsive. Decided I want a master's degree, signed up, there, boom, I'm in, paid the deposit, now I'm stuck, and I'm off doing it. And it caused a lot of issues. I am thankful for those impulses and that I went this way. But it also reminds me that I have to take minutes and I have to take a pause before I make really big decisions. And teaching our children that as early as possible is a really great way to be. If you have a child that is showing signs of being an overachiever, they often really struggle with failure. So we'll see big reactions. And this is something I actually tell the parents, well, we got to teach them how to fail. We got to teach them that sometimes we just do our best and that has to be enough. And so it's just important to note. The problem with masking. So masking doesn't just happen with neurodivergence. Masking is any time a person is altering their state of being, I like to say, their true self. Any of that stuff can be masking. So people mask from trauma. People mask to present to the world an image or idea that they want. Some families mask. So masking is not just applied to ADHD. However, they are discovering the level of masking that some of us have done is mind-blowing. My own personal story, I share my decade of heavy, heavy masking and what that cost me and what it still costs me today. All right. The other thing you need to know, again, if we're talking about girls, it's just there's so much research coming out on this. So you just have to stay in touch. I will have a whole section devoted to females here where I will try to keep up with the research for you. That's one of the things I'm trying to do the most is take the stuff that's out there on social media and the influencers and the top researchers and my ADHD coach training and all that stuff. I'm going to try to keep the relevant stuff here in my community so that you can access it and you can, find your own people that you kind of like to listen to that resonate with you, that you connect with. The thing we are discovering, or the thing that they're discovering, is that estrogen helps to regulate dopamine. So now stop and think about that. You're a girl. You have an ADHD brain and nervous system. You struggle with dopamine. You struggle with all that stuff. Then all of a sudden you start to get your period, or you start to go into puberty and estrogen starts to be at play. Well, that impacts dopamine. They're still figuring out exactly how, but it's intense. And I can personally say that most of my ADHD emotional stuff, like I think I probably always had it, but for me, or maybe it's just when I remember, it definitely happened right around when I started to develop and I got my period. Definitely noticed a huge change there. Also noticed it when I got pregnant and afterwards. So the paralysis, the absolutely, sitting there not being able to engage in my life was overwhelming, and in some ways, one of the worst times in my life when it should have been one of the happiest. I now know that it was postpartum. At the time, people were suggesting it to me, but I had none of the inclination of hurting the baby or being alone. That was never an issue. I adored every minute of that. Mine was more engaging in life beyond the baby. I could barely engage in my marriage. I couldn't engage outside the house. I was struggling with friendships. I was struggling with everything. I lost friends during this time. I just simply couldn't cope. And some people had to just let me go because in some ways I wasn't even a kind person at that time. They're finding that when estrogen drops, so puberty, postpartum, and here's where lots of us are coming out, perimenopause and menopause, the ADHD symptoms often skyrocket. So they get out of control. And many of us just, describe it as feeling like we're going crazy, and losing their minds, being outside of themselves. I'm just using some of the things the ladies in my last group used to say, and I connected with so many of them. Your brain chemistry at this point for girls has literally lost its support system. So we already struggle with it. And then during these amazing times in our lives, that should be some of the best times of our lives, and they're beautiful and natural and times to be celebrated, they have a direct impact on our ADHD. And so that's something you just need to stay in touch with if you're someone with ADHD and you're a female, or if you're raising a daughter or a girl with ADHD. Awesome. So let's just take a look at this for a sec. So when we diagnose a 40-year-old woman or a 50-year-old man or older, we're not just giving them a label. We're giving them a pardon. We're telling them that the moral failings that they've been apologizing for, the messy house, the lost keys, the wasted potential, the million hobbies that they've done, the explosive reactions, the moods, were all actually medical symptoms. And you give these people a gift of them starting to understand that their lifetime full of shame is changing and transforming into a future of strategy. The thing I love about this is, and there's people who disagree with me, okay? I do not think ADHD children or people are broken. Please let me make that clear, all right? However, I know that we feel broken. I don't know how else to say it. I have felt broken most of my life. Always just about able to grasp something, always knowing something was off, and the constant, corrections and all that, just feeling like something was wrong with me. So I sometimes don't want to fight when people tell me they feel broken or are broken. I think it's one of those things where you have to kind of sit with them in it and understand it. In no way, shape, or form are they broken. But if they feel that way, I understand where that feeling comes from. I tell the kids all the time, or, because they understand it, I'll say, think of a big glass, like mirror, and it's in front of you and it shatters. And that's how you feel about learning, or that's how you feel about school, that it's just this big mess of broken shards of glass. And some days, you can pick up a big one and it's not so bad. And other days, those little pieces just get under your skin and everything's difficult and you feel everything and you react to everything. We explain that all those broken pieces of glass are still able to make something beautiful. A disco ball, a stained glass window. I even do an exercise with some of my counseling students where we make a little stained glass window and we talk about our pain. And this is how I start to address some ADHD trauma. So that is important as well. When people say they're broken and you quickly dismiss it, they may feel like you're not listening to them. It's better to address the broken part when they have had a chance to understand ADHD, sit with their own diagnosis, in ADHD, and then we can address the broken feeling inside of us. So I am doing something with all these lessons. So if you go over to the not the comment section, but the community member section, there will be this question, and please engage. All right. So if you can get engaged and stay engaged on a task or a hobby or whatever, is there anything you feel you couldn't do if you truly were engaged and stayed engaged? If your answer is, I can pretty much do anything once I'm into it, you aren't lacking ability. You're looking for the right on switch. And this is the best gift we can give kids, is for them to see that they're wired differently, but that they're not, that this doesn't have to limit them. They just have to find different ways to do things. And sometimes it will be the weirdest and most unique way, but what does it matter if they're getting their goals done, if they're able to learn, if they're able to soar? I don't know. So think about that and go put your answer in the comment section so that we can all kind of see some of the things that we've experienced. And this is the part I've loved about my journey, my experience with support groups. One of the reasons I'm doing this is the importance of finding other people living your experience, living or raising ADHD children. Parents, we need to stick together because those kids, man, they can drive us right up a wall, right? Like those moments when you're just going to lose your shit. It's so nice to be able to have a community that gets it and that are fiercely protective and loving of their children, but also not enabling them or making, allowing their difference to hold them back. And instead, parents are working with those brains, with those nervous systems, and making sure that their child has everything they need to succeed. And ADHD can be a beautiful part of life. It definitely provides me some of my best gifts. It also presents me with some of my worst challenges and struggles. And that's just the reality of ADHD. So remember, you were never broken. You were just looking for the right switch in a world that only has the off and on, and you tend to be more of a dimmer. Your voice matters, and your light is needed. You've been listening to Mrs. C and me. Join us next time for more tools and conversations on ADHD. You've got this, and your child does too. Now go out there and steer your own ship, fly your own plane, and direct your own show. You and the ones you love were always meant to be in the spotlight. I got you.